Let's see here. Our first question this week is from Leanne. Are low calories okay when in ketosis? Hi, Rob. We have all heard the stories of people eating very low fat and low calorie diets to lose weight, like in The Biggest Loser, and they later gain the weight back and can no longer eat as much as they used to and maintain as their metabolism is messed up. I'm wondering if there's any science behind a low calorie, like 800 to 1,000 per day, hurting your metabolism. My thinking is if you're getting enough nutrients between food and supplements within the 800 calories, plus your body is eating your fat stores, would there not be any negative effects? I'd love to hear your thoughts. I was not able to find anything relating to this on the web. I've always tried to stick to a small calorie deficit, eating around 1,600 to 1,800 per day. And while successful, lower calories would probably speed up my weight loss. I've lost about 60 pounds following your plan, still have another 100 to go. Thanks and love everything you do. Thanks for changing my life. Leanne, and she says she's a Keto Masterclass student.
Awesome. Cool. It's almost like that stuff works. Man, there's a lot to unpack in this. So it's interesting. I'll use Luis Villaseñor as an example, and really just all of the Ketogains community, which we've learned so much kind of observing those guys and hanging out with those folks. So Luis is very muscular. He's several inches shorter than I am, but he's probably like 5 to 10 pounds heavier than I am. Super muscular, very active, now involved with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu like 5 days a week, in addition to his strength training and really motoring along with both of those. And so he probably weighs about 170, maybe 175 pounds, somewhere in that range, and is quite active, has eaten a ketogenic diet for 20 plus years. And he only eats about 1,200 to 1,600 calories a day, which most people would freak out. And they're like, oh my God, that's too little. And the thing about it that I think is interesting, and Leanne brings up something that is really important. The rebound dieting is very injurious to the metabolism. So some people in kind of the evidence-based nutrition space, they point this out rightly, but they make a solid case. A couple of these folks have made the solid case that if you do something, find something that you're going to do permanently, which is great advice, but it's clearly very difficult to do. The tendency is that once somebody has really severely dieted down, although I will lean on the fact that most of the studies being cited here are kind of the standard high carb, low fat. And even though that can work, I just wonder if there's, kind of a different metabolic endpoint in that whole story with regards to stress and all that type of stuff. But it's, God, I'm thinking like 50 different things. I'm trying to pin down the course here. What's interesting to me is when people follow a nutrient dense kind of keto, paleo type diet, they don't seem to need as many calories. Like the usual caloric recommendations are not really there. I think I've mentioned in the past that ages ago, talking with Greg Glassman, the founder of CrossFit, he recommended a modification of the zone diet that ended up being a very high fat zone diet and a type of approach. It was about 65 to 70% fat. It's a little higher in carbohydrate than what you would see in a standard keto recommendation, but also he was doing this within people that were doing CrossFit. So it's kind of, probably not that big of a deal to be, for like someone my size, I would have been 140, 150 grams of protein, similar amount of carbs, and then whatever fat filled out the rest of that to make 70% of calories. But what he noticed is that people were pretty consistently about 25 to 30% lower in caloric need than what they were when they were eating a standard kind of westernized diet. So it's hard to tell on this stuff, what is going to injure someone versus not injure someone. Shameless plug for Element. I think that being on point with electrolytes, in particular sodium, is kind of a make or break story, or facet of this story. If people are both low calorie, low carb, and deficient in sodium, then that is exacerbating the stress response in the body. So could definitely make a case that you need to be on point with the sodium requirements, but it's interesting. And I've got to say that, like, when I first arrived at the Ketogain scene and saw what Tyler and Luis were doing and what folks were achieving in that community, when I looked at the calorie intake levels, I was kind of like, holy smokes, man. Like it was a little intimidating, but and again, it's anecdote, and we're going to be doing some pieces talking about anecdote and what we can and can't learn from that, and maybe, how to couch that in a more productive fashion. But when you see thousands and thousands of people succeeding and not being broken, not having their cycles destroyed and stuff like that, then you start seeing some trends. And granted, it's not a randomized controlled trial and all that stuff. There could be some selection bias going on there, but I'm not nearly as concerned about these lower calorie intakes as a lot of other folks are. And it seems like if keto works for you, both from a metabolic level and a performance level, it seems like a good option to kind of mitigate those blood sugar highs and lows, which I think makes eating a lower calorie intake easier. There is kind of a reality that if you are consistently fueled off of carbohydrate, your body is going to naturally be hungrier more often as we deplete the carbohydrate stores in our body. If you are more consistently fat fueled, even though you will get hungry, it's a different type of hunger and it's a different type of frequency with regards to the way that hunger occurs. So you could make a case that the lower carb approach to a low calorie diet might buy one some headroom or some buffer with regards to hunger, which is really going to be key for making this stuff work long term. So,
okay.
Any thoughts you have on that, or?
I don't think so. I mean, you make the point that Luis is eating 1,200 to 1,600 calories. What do you think about Leanne's caloric intake?
It's hard to know. I don't know if she's 5'2". I don't know
Right.
if what her lean body mass is and whatnot. Right. But chances are she's probably in an ideal body state, probably smaller and less muscular than Luis, probably. Because even though Luis isn't super tall, he's
Very
big.
Yeah.
So the numbers that she's citing there, they might get adjusted up a little bit once she hits maintenance. Mm-hmm. But it's surprising how people, even at pretty remarkably high work output in that community, are not eating massive amounts mm-hmm. of calories. And again, there's I think a certain thermodynamic efficiency. And this is kind of an interesting thing. I'm glad you mentioned that so I can spin this thing out and make it even longer. We've talked about this in the past earlier when we launched the Keto Masterclass, because historically there's been this kind of meme within keto low carb land specifically that you can kind of eat all the fat and it doesn't matter so long as you keep insulin levels low. In fact, I could make the case that you need fewer calories on keto, and we've kind of gone through and made that case elsewhere. But again, there's a certain thermodynamic efficiency, there's a certain satiety element to this whole story. So I could actually make the case that you probably require fewer calories on keto than you do on a more mixed diet. So that is definitely something to keep in mind, which could tweak this stuff. And even though I'm not as starry-eyed about caloric restriction and fasting from a longevity perspective as many people are, like I don't think it's going to double human average lifespan and stuff like that, there are clearly some benefits to simply not overeating, which saying simply not overeating is an incredibly not simple thing to do in the modern world. So yeah.
Okay.